A warm welcome once again to the High Performance Human Podcast. Andy here in studio once more. And I'll tell you what, I have got one half, I'd like to think the better half, of a power couple on today's episode of the High Performance Human Podcast. Amanda Delosa. Amanda the Panda Delosa, as she's known in certain circles, is the director of Yellowpanda, which is a PR firm that has been doing incredible stuff, not just in terms of your traditional PR space, but modernizing the way that it's looked at as well, I think is something that she's done tremendously well with. And I've been doing my homework on you, Amanda, by the way. And one thing that's really, really impressed me is the energy and the understanding that she has when it comes to her approach to public relations. I've been super impressed with. I'm not going to lie. It's been really, really impressive to dig into and find out. Amanda, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Amazing. Thank you for having me. And I'm very excited to chat all these things with you.
Look, the pleasure is all mine. It really, really is. Now, team, Amanda and I have been doing various emails back and forth. And I think via emails, as we've been getting all this organized, getting to know each other a little bit more and whatnot. Amanda is recently become a mum. It was not stopped her in her path of success in any way, shape, or form. If anything, I don't know. I mean, I don't know you that well, but if anything, it kind of feels like becoming a mum was almost giving you a bloody superpower or something.
That's what they say. It is actually quite true. I think initially it's tough. I'm not going to lie. It kind of breaks you apart, but it gives you an opportunity then to rebuild yourself into the highest possible version of yourself. And when you're building that version, you're building it with the mindset of wanting to be so boundary driven to protect your time and your energy to ensure that the best parts of you are going towards, your family.
Yep.
As opposed to just being obsessed with business. It makes you more dimensional in a way.
Yeah.
So it really is a blessing. And yeah, it's tough initially, that first 12 months postpartum really, it beats you up.
Yeah.
But an absolute blessing to come out of the other side of it and have so much more clarity and, as I said, boundaries to spend your energy doing the things that really light you up.
That's amazing. I love that. And we're probably going to dig into that a little bit later on. But first and foremost, for the people that don't know who you are, because with some of the best PR professionals, a lot of the time, they're known for not being known. Right? They're known for being the secret sauce behind the success of someone else. So for those people that don't know who Panda is, give us a bit of an MO as to who you are and what you're about and how long you've been in the game for.
Yeah, first I just want to touch on what you said about being sort of invisible and behind the scenes, because I did spend a large part of my career working in politics. And when you work in politics, you're basically told that you do need to be sort of seen and not heard. So wind back to working in politics, of which I did about 6 or 7 years representing federal politicians and state politicians as a media and communications advisor. So my role then was to basically build up the public profile of politicians through things like traditional, publicity. So we're going and we're trying to get media coverage and that sort of thing, but doing all of the speech writing on legislation that came through the parliament. So I learned about, so many random things when it came to the law. So my first career was actually real estate. So I was in real estate sales, property management and administration for probably 5 or 6 years. And then I always wanted to go to university. I'd had a couple of stints of trying to go to university, but my backstory is that I'm a teenage runaway at 16 who had to go out and start my life off my own 2 feet.
Right.
So I couldn't actually afford to go to university like most young people could that were still living at home and had the support of their parents. So I had to go into the workforce early, but I always wanted to return to university. And initially I started a criminology degree because I watched so much CSI and
NCIS and all that sort of stuff.
When I was younger, and I'm like, I want to be a forensic psychologist. So I started the criminology degree, and I also had an interest in the police force at a point there as well. So I thought that was going to be my path, but it didn't light me up. I dropped out of it. I continued to work. But at around, I think it was 2024, I finally decided to go to university. And this was off the back of my first international trip overseas. And I had always wanted to actually be a host on Getaway. Like that was just something that I thought, oh, it'd be so cool to, travel. This is after traveling, like travel the world and be on television talking about all these great places. And so I thought, well, I'll go to university and I'll study communications. And I ended up opting for a double degree in journalism and public relations.
Right.
So off went to university. I was there for 3 years, I think. And I was due to graduate probably within another 12 months. But at the time, I was doing a lot of volunteer work because I think, being a bit older, so there was a lot of younger people. I was probably 24 or 25 at the stage. So the majority of my peers at uni were, 17, 18, 19 straight out of school. Mm-hmm. So I knew in order to stand out once we did all graduate, you've got hundreds of people graduating at the same time. The Gold Coast isn't a massive place when it comes to job opportunity. So I thought, well, I'll go do some volunteer work and I'll start getting some really good experience on paper as a publicist. And one of the roles that I took on was at my local surf club doing publicity for them.
Right.
And so one evening at their awards night, I'd won Fundraiser of the Year and there was a politician in the room. And of course, Fundraiser of the Year is really going to pique the interest of a politician whose survival depends on fundraising for campaigns. But anyway, this politician at the time was Karen Andrews, who has been a minister of the government here in Australia. And she offered me an interview, went in for the interview and I got the job. So I actually decided not to continue with my university full time, take the job, get into a role so I wasn't competing with all the graduates and I would finish university online for the next 12 months while I worked full time.
Right.
My first week in politics was actually budget week in the federal parliament. So I was thrown right into the deep end.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I ended up in politics. Did that for about 6 or 7 years, but it's a grueling job.
I was going to say, right, because your work is literally on full display for scrutiny for people that are scrutinized to kingdom come anyway. Is that in a PR sense, does it get much more challenging than that?
Well, going back to the previous point that you raised about the visibility versus invisibility and how most of us do work behind the scenes, well, that was one of the biggest things that I was, being faced with. In that role, I was very much behind the scenes and we were told that we couldn't have any kind of our own sort of public profile because anything that we did could be used against the MP that we work for. So it was basically you step 1 foot out of line on social media and you end up in the press or you end up, whatever it might be, you lose your job. So I had no literally limited social media, had shut everything down. And then I think, after a while, feeling very burnt out and wanting to do something different, one of the main things that I used to do in my role, particularly during campaign season, and I worked on one of the biggest campaigns with the most national focus in history, which was the 2013 campaign, where we had the former Queensland Premier, Peter Beattie, be parachuted into our seat to try and win our seat. So we had the whole entire national media contingency sort of following us around and I was the media advisor in that seat. So I worked very closely with, the federal government's media team during that time. So we were going out and we were visiting small businesses and taking ministers out to go and do all of that sort of thing. The high-vis vest and the hide hat.
Babies and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. And I would love just having those side conversations with the business owners and sort of learning and hearing about their story and what they were doing. And they were doing some incredible stuff. They weren't telling their story anywhere. Yeah. And so we'd go out and we'd help them tell the story and we'd bring the media there and we'd do media coverage and they get on the news and they'd, then I'd be like, guys, you've got to repurpose this. You should be putting this through your social media. So I found myself almost mentoring and coaching and helping these small business people and it really lit me up. I was like, I actually really enjoy doing this. So then I had the idea, what if I was to do more of this? And I started kind of just freelancing. And then by the time I had enough clients, I went from sort of freelancing to replacing my income in the first 12 months. I mean, my first step was I'll leave my job with 3 months worth of savings. And if I can't actually make this work, it's like a sink or swim approach. Yep. I'll just go back to a job.
Yep.
But within the first 3 months, I had secured enough clientele to keep going. In the first year, I replaced my income. And then every year thereafter, I was pretty much doubling it. So I got to the point where I was working as a freelance consultant through to having a team of 5 full-time employees shortly before I moved down here to Sydney.
Wow.
So it's been quite the journey. And I think the piece that we were going back to before about the visibility versus the invisibility, being able to start my own business and finally be able to come out and choose how I wanted to show up and who I was and use my full personality and everything about me that makes me me was so freeing at the time. And that's where the piece of the personal branding kind of come into the work that I do too, particularly around helping founders sort of stand out and grow their own public profile, similar to what I did in politics, became really appealing. But I realized that the piece that was missing for a lot of them was the personal discovery of like, who am I? What are my values? How do I want to show up online? Like, what makes me unique? So the work that I started venturing into became a combination of, yes, like public relations tactics, communication and that sort of thing, but also this beautiful like personal exploration and growth piece about people being able to really find out who they are and share that with the world.
And we are definitely going to dig into that, because that is something that so many people struggle with, is twofold. One, understanding who the hell they are, but two, owning it in a public sense. And actually, or not even in a public sense from a social media point of view, owning it in a public sense, just almost with their own families sometimes, generational sort of pressures to do this, to do that, to do the other, based on historical whatever. And that going against the grain to how they feel and who they are. We're going to dig into that in a big, big way. Before we crack on, though, we have one question that we ask everybody. I've got this belief around high performance. I think there's 4 elements to it: success, connection, influence, and happiness. I'm always interested to see other people's definitions of it. So, Amanda, tell me what your definition is. How do you define a high-performance human?
I'm going to throw 4 things back at you as well.
Amazing.
With this. So I came
I'll
across
see your 4 and raise you
another 4. But I came across this theory many years ago called the 4 burner theory. And it talks about that your life is, you think of a cooktop and you've got the 4 burners broken up into family, work, health, and friends. And I think that a high performance individual is someone who can recognize the season that they are in and the constraints that they have, and actually dedicate their time to maybe 1 or 2 of those burners at any one time, and to be able to move away or sacrifice from 2 of the others or 3 of the others, depending on how much you're wanting to succeed on that specific goal that you have. But understand that it's not always about being able to be on top of everything, but to choose things and to dedicate time to things in the season of your life that you need to be able to obviously achieve.
That's very different to what a lot of people have said on the show so far.
I aim to be different.
Well, that's part of your gig to help everybody else be bloody different. So, geez, practice what you preach.
Yeah.
Well, I love the cooktop analogy's awesome, in the sense of very rarely do we need to have all 4 burners on.
Yeah.
Normally, we'd only need 1 or 2.
Yeah.
And we have to keep an eye on them as well, in case things boil over and things like that as well. Exactly, catch on fire, which my partner's mother did successfully the other week. That was hilarious. Not. So we need to really have a bit of a look into that analogy, because when I've been asking everybody else, there's been talking in a similar sort of vein to me with respect to personality traits and so on and so forth. Realistically, your version of a high-performance human definition is tremendously practical in its application. A lot of the theory around it is all well and good, but team, this is absolutely something for your notes. If the practicality doesn't fit, or if the theory does not align with the practicalities of life, and I loved how you highlighted there, within the constraints of what you have around you, within the constraints of your resources and whatnot. That line is really, really critical, because we all have these fanciful ideas as to what we want to be and who we want to be and what we want to achieve and so on and so forth. But ultimately, we can't deny we are bound by the limitations of our resources.
Absolutely. And I think Jack has been one of my biggest teachers in understanding like how to manage those constraints. And like, for one of the examples that you would have with that theory is that if one of the constraints is it's always going to be your time, right? You can't physically do everything, but we're big believers in outsourcing, anything sort of, below our pay grade, or I guess like below, things that we don't want to do that don't light us up, basically. So we'll call it like life admin and administration and cleaning and, all that sort of thing, is to literally outsource that to other people, so it frees you up to be able to spend more time on the things that are actually going to move the needle to where you want to go. Yeah. So it is a resource management thing. It's definitely something that I've adopted and learnt from Jack that has become like our way and our value going forward.
And Jack being the other half, the old ball and chain, shall we call him for now, and who's also going to be on an episode of the High Performance Human podcast team, Jack Delosa, who's got an amazing entrepreneurial school, which is going gangbusters and has been going for a few years now. But tying this into one of the main reasons to why I wanted you to come onto the show yourself, Amanda, is your understanding of, and I hate using it, I think it's overused, I think it's abused, it's bastardized, and it kind of makes me want to vomit in my mouth a little bit when I use it, but we'll use it for now. The understanding of creating authenticity in who you are at all times, a part of that would be understanding how much energy, how much time, how much money, how much stuff you've got available to show that part of yourself in a truly authentic way. I saw this awesome little quote, which I shared on my social media, which is, if you've only got 40% to give and all you give is 40%, then effectively you've given 100% of you for that day. And that's totally fine. Talk to me about the struggle that you see, I bet, on a regular basis, or even within yourself, around people's struggle to put enough energy, time, resources, commitment, bottle, nerve, for want of a better word, into this whole thing, which everybody bangs on about, but very few people get right, which is the authentic piece, owning who you are.
Yeah. I mean, authenticity, if we look at what we were just discussing before, like if authenticity is I guess the overarching word for it, or I guess the theory, then to unpack some practicalities behind how to be authentic, there are a lot of building blocks. But I would say the one thing that stands out when I hear you ask me that question as to how people are either mastering it or not, it comes down to consistency. So people do fail to be consistent. And I feel like just from a branding standpoint, there's a lot of things that I notice common between personal and corporate branding or business branding is that people get very excited in the initial sort of design phase, the creating the logos, the pretty, the moth to the flame type things that people find like really fun. But it's the things like being consistent and, continually having to put out content and to be very disciplined, which is obviously the hard part. And a lot of people don't realize that whilst a brand or an image or a reputation can be destroyed, basically overnight with one wrong move, a brand actually takes a long time to build. And I know that with my clients in particular, over the years that I've represented them, they've asked the question straight off the bat when they invest in the first strategy piece, like how long will it take until I see results?
Of course.
And I mean, like measuring ROI in branding or public relations is not as easy as like, well, for every $10 you spend on, this ad, you get like
right?
this.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's always been a hard thing to measure. But I have always said, I think around the 6-month mark, if you are consistent, if you're consistently showing up and we've got you a few media hits and, we might have nominated them for a few awards and, like there's some runs on the board, there's some momentum going, you will feel it. And what I mean by you'll feel it is like people start to notice you more. You have people reaching out saying, hey, I saw you here or I saw you there. Like it's just a general feeling of you start to feel more visible and there's more awareness around who you are and what you stand for. But from the practicality point, there's so much involved in building out that strategy piece originally so you know what you are going to be consistently putting out there. And I say that by, understanding like who you are, like what your values are, what is your personality archetype, what are your key messages, what should be the tone, like how do you speak? And I mean, this all needs to be, as we say, authentic and true and real to who you are. But there's a lot of crafting that goes into sort of doing that initial piece, which gives you the roadmap of how to actually show up. And then from that roadmap, we would identify, the different things that you can do to be to be able to attract audience and to be discoverable. So that would include things like, doing podcast shows and award nominations and writing op-eds and things. And then obviously the biggest piece too is that many, many years ago, we had to actually go to the media to be featured, but now we are the media. With social media, we can be producing all of our own, content and shows and themes as well. So that presents the opportunity of being able to do all of those things, but with it comes a lot of effort and time, resources and funds that need to be obviously invested into that. And some of the biggest, most successful personal brands that we have today are spending in excess of 6 figures a month or more on dedicated media teams and output.
Yeah.
But that's not to say you should be you know, turning away from that and going, well, I feel defeated. Like I can't afford to be spending, you know, 6 figures a month or something. But my advice would always be like, just pick one thing and do it really well and be really consistent. So you don't need to be on all of the channels. You know, you could just choose one channel that you know is favorable to being connected to the audience that you're wanting to connect with and just go with that. And I think one of the best ways to show up online and get out there and reach people is through video, like so people can see your personality and they can get to know you as well.
It's interesting. There's like 5-10 things that we could unpack with that, right? One of the first things, because consistency is very much common. That is a common theme when it comes to this whole high performance thing. Lots of people have talked about consistency. I want to tie it in with part of that conversation that we had just before about understanding your limitations of your resources, right? Because let's take financials and the tangibles out of it. There are plenty of young parents and things like that, and people like that are on this show where just having the energy to be consistent can be a massive barrier to entry, huge barrier to entry. You then pair that energy, because obviously when we are low on energy, we are generally low on patience. We're generally low on resolve to see things through and whatnot. And it's generally, call it bloody Sod's Law, Murphy's Law. Generally speaking, whenever we're low on energy, that's when we'll cop a left hook from someone or a troll or someone who casts disparaging comments at us or whatever, that sort of knock us off our tracks with regards to where we want to head to, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you will have had lots of clients. I bet a lot of the police that you dealt with would have copped a beating at one stage or another and be like, you know what, because they are human. Believe it or not, politicians are humans as well.
Yeah.
And they come away from the stage and be like, nah, this is I can't do this anymore. You might have copped this yourself, maybe.
Yeah, no, I have my own, personal example of that. And then I guess the practicality measure that I would explain. So the example is, I knew that going into having a child, I had no idea what I was going to be in for. I didn't know how much time I'd be able to dedicate to continuing to, grow and scale my online presence, or at least, keep it active. So I went into that with a plan to ensure that I still had that visibility by hiring someone, or essentially having someone on my team continue to put content out for me, but we would work together to bank a whole heap of that content in advance so that she could continue to help me keep visibility, so I didn't just completely drop off the face of the earth while my energy was being constrained at the time. So in terms of, I guess, someone starting out, if you're starting out in the mindset of that situation where you are actually feeling really low on energy, like that's probably not a good time to start.
Yeah, true.
But when you have the energy, start with a mindset of, I'm going to start and I'm going to create and bank a whole heap of content, so that when I do have those moments when I'm feeling low on energy or I'm getting, beaten up by life, I don't disappear, because I've got stuff that can still be posted. Might even be that you find someone. There's a lot of VAs and things out there now, and there's a lot of actual apps that you can use that can, preload and
All
so
the
there's
practical stuff.
Yeah.
I really like what you just said there, though, of taking advantage of your high energy moments. That's something for your notes. Undoubtedly, stick that at the top of the page of notes that you've got for this episode, like 100% in capital letters. Taking advantage of the good times is really, really important. One of my favorite OGs, Jim Rohn, he talks about the 4 seasons when it comes to business. And you've got to harvest in the spring, and you've got to get ready for the winters, because the winters will come. And you can apply that to yourself. There is not one human on this planet that doesn't have winters in their life, right? Whether it's bad times, bad energy, in some instances, depression, anxiety, all that sort of stuff. Everybody has winters. It's understanding that in the winters, you're not likely to harvest all that much, but you've got to make sure that when you're in the spring and the summer, you got to be ready to harvest all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
That is massive.
Yeah.
That is a massive point. And I love that you've said, while you're in high energy, get your shit done. And team, there's no harm in admitting you know what, I'm in low energy mode. I'm not feeling great right now.
But you just can't create when you're in that space.
Nah.
Like I know firsthand, like if I'm in low energy mode and if I'm feeling defeated, you don't have that creative spark or energy. Like your heart's just not in it. And that is not the time to be, creating anything worthwhile putting out into the universe.
How do you handle your low energy moments though? And if we shift into business owner mode for a second here, how do you handle, and especially being in a creative role like PR, how do you handle those low energy moments so that you still manage to turn up with a strong level of productivity for your clients when, they need you to be creative for them?
Yeah. That's the thing. Like, historically, there hasn't been a lot of permission for me to ever have those low moments. And I've always been, like, anyone knows me, I'm the Energizer Bunny. Like, I can pull energy out of anywhere if I need. So, like, I am very lucky. I am blessed that I am pretty good at, still soldiering on even when I am in one of those places. But then more recently now, I give myself permission if I do have those moments to actually reset and recharge. And it might be that on a day where I'm actually feeling low energy, that I just say, well, I'm just going to get one really important thing done today. So at least I'm not completely, walking away or abandoning my, commitments. But if I can just get one thing done and then prioritize rest, go get a massage, do something for myself, then I know that by resting in those down moments, I'll come back stronger tomorrow and I'll be able to actually take on more. And as I was saying before, it's like work in the high energy moment and batch as much as you can do so that you can afford to give yourself the grace to take a bit of time out when you need it when you're low. If energy is like this, then it's about doing the most when you're at high energy. And the thing is, when things are good and people are operating at high energy, what people can often fall into the trap of thinking like, oh, everything's fine, like I don't need to do anything else, like everything's good. Most people do actually want to operate from the low energy standpoint because that's when it's feeling like stressful. It's like, oh my God, like I've got to, get something done. Like I'm so far behind. Whereas, when you're charging on with the energy, you're not really as mindful of that. But I think it's a pre-planning exercise really, essentially.
And an awareness piece that I know I've fucked up on royally on various occasions. And generally speaking, I'll feel more obligated. And a lot of the stuff that I tend to do is it will be really forced and it will not hit the mark anywhere near as much when I'm in a winter or a low energy moment compared to when I just do something on the fly because I'm in high energy and something, a spark happens and I'm like, right, bang, bang, bang. And it will just go wee and it just, everything just works out really, really well.
Yeah.
This is a hugely important piece and it segues in quite nicely to what I wanted to ask you about when you talked about how becoming a parent created another dimension, another layer to your being, an evolution in your being. Because obviously energy management, when you're a parent, that's, it's one of the biggest challenges I would have thought.
Yeah.
It certainly was for me. What have you found has been a couple of the things that have been brought into your game as a result of becoming a mum that you're really, really grateful for? Because we were chatting in the green room just before, and I said that a lot of people that listen to the show, I don't want to say that they resent their kids because that's really harsh. Of course they don't. But there's always that sense of what could have been had I not had my kids at a traditional age or had I just waited and actually explored myself first before doing the human nature thing of procreating and becoming a parent. What are a couple of things, let's flip it on its head, a couple of things that you're really, really grateful for that you've added to your game in the evolution of Amanda Delosa from being a parent?
Well, I think the first piece is being really conscious about what being a parent would look like from early on for me. So, and because I will address what we do now that is making it so easy for us, I want to start by explaining that, I entered the workforce at 13 years old, worked my guts out to get to where I am, to be in a position where I could afford to approach parenthood alongside someone else who'd been working their guts out since they were the same age, to be in a position where we could actually hire help. So for the first 6 months of Ari's life, I did it all. And then at the 6-month mark, we did get a nanny in, which would help free me up to be able to get back to, some of the business stuff and some of the things that make me me, because you do 100% like lose yourself as a mother, like just all the bottle washing, the diaper
Big
changing, the
time.
naps. Like it was just so like monotonous and routine for me because I'm someone who has always had so much like freedom and color and, you know, like just these amazing experiences.
And just to highlight that, by the way, team, for those of you that can't watch the video, every single one of her fingernails is a different color. I've noticed. It goes to highlight what you just said there, by the way. Yeah,
So
anyway,
we digress, but that's the thing. Like I love, you know, variety and adventure. And so one thing for me that really kills my spirit and actually made me depressed was finding myself in like so much monotony and routine.
Yeah.
And I remember being in the kitchen one night and Jack just looked at me and he's like, we're hiring someone. Like, this is not you. Like, this is not you in the kitchen every night, you know, washing the bottles. And at that point, yeah, we ended up finding a nanny to come and support us.
Did you have any pressure from family members or anyone close to you around that being a bad thing? Oh,
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
not what that's not what why are you giving
not
up your
that-
motherhood sort of thing?
Yeah,
Or
not that I would say that like I feel like anyone in particular had said anything, but there is a general feeling. I mean, there was one comment at one point where it was like, well, I wouldn't want a nanny raising my kids. I don't want someone else raising my kids. And it's like, they're not raising her. Like we spend such beautiful, like conscious, connected time with her. So like a day in the life for me is that Ari will get up probably anywhere between 6:30 and 7:30. And I'm with her until 10 o'clock when the nanny arrives. And we spend that first 2 hours laughing, hugging, playing, having breakfast. Like it is, and Jack's there as well for, you know, the first part of that before he goes to work also. So we spend this beautiful, like connected time together. I still have a couple of days throughout the week where I just have her solely one-on-one with me as well. And then I work from home most of the time too. So I'll be upstairs in the office, but I'll hear her downstairs laughing and playing. So I'll go down and interact with her and give her a cuddle and spend 5 minutes with her. And I actually have read that 5 minutes of very, like it's to actually be super present with a child for 5 minutes is the same as being with a child for 2 hours while you're sitting on your phone, you've got the television on the background and you just like play on the floor, like, you know. So there's, you know, the thing with parenthood is like everyone's got their own views on how it should be done and what's right and what's wrong. And a huge thing for us going into parenthood was like just blocking out the noise and just being very intuitive and going, you know what? We're just going to do it our way. We're going to feel into it and we're going to do what's right for us. And the result of that has been raising a child who, you know, sleeps 12 to 14 hours a night. Most people hate us for that, but is super happy.
my 5-year-old doesn't do that.
But we have this beautiful, happy, balanced little cherub who just loves doing life with us. And I think the other piece too worth mentioning is that we do a lot of travel. I mean, she's had 32 flights since she was 6 weeks old. I think she's got about 8 country stamps in her passport currently just from this year alone. And she loves the travel and she's such a trooper when she's traveling. She just loves being with us. And I think that like that's living the dream. I used to think that you had to choose between, you know, being a person who has a career and might travel and have like this really cool life because kids were just going to hold you back. But what Jack and I are proof of is that you can actually have it all and have, you know, it's life is by your design. And if you've worked hard enough to get to a point where you can actually do it consciously, like we have, then it's a beautiful thing and it's actually better. Like Jack and I say all the time, like it is so much better traveling with her and having her there. You know, we'll still nip away and have a babysitter or a nanny every now and then so we can do adult time and go for dinners and do things like that too. She's not with us all the time. Yeah, so we can still be us and he can be him and I can be me. Like, you know, we still have that. But yeah, it's just better. Like having your own family is like the best thing ever. And I had someone ask me at one of Jack's retreats recently, she came up to me, oh, I follow you. I don't know when to start a family. Like when should I do that? And for me, my advice to anyone is like, you know, when you feel like you're at a point where you can do it the way that you've always envisioned that you wanted to do it. So like, first of all, like understand what kind of, you know, parent you want to be and what kind of lifestyle you want to have as a family and with your child. And work towards that. And when you know you can actually achieve that with the right person, then go for it.
I want to dig into the word conformity with you off the back of that. And anybody that's a new parent or even an old parent or thinking about becoming a parent, just rewind the last monologue that we got from Amanda just there, because I can hear a few of the people listening to this commenting, right? I can hear a few of them saying, it's all right saying all this from a position of privilege. You can hear it.
Yeah,
a mile
absolutely.
off. Talking about travel and all this sort of stuff. Well,
Yeah.
good for you. You've got the money to do this. You've got the money to hire a nanny. You've got the money to
We didn't win the lottery though. That's the thing. It's like we got there because we grinded and we worked super hard. Like I'm 39 years old. Like I pushed it right to the last nth degree to become a mother, to be set up first. And there was always the risk that maybe I could have waited too late and I could have missed out. But I mean, we haven't become in the, as we would say, like privileged position through lack of, for me, like spending the first half of my entire life building towards getting to this point.
Now, whenever people talk about that, and team, guys, if you are hearing some of this commentary in your own head, or if you're saying it as you're listening to it, I want to talk about this conformity piece because I feel that a lot of people, and I did, and you did back in the day, we used conformity as an excuse, as a reason for not doing, right? Whether it's consciously or subconsciously, it happened. And this is something that still a lot of people struggle with today. Although there is so much, so many different opinions and theories and beliefs and all this sort of stuff these days, the sense of conformity is something that I'm coming to discover or coming to realize is so ingrained in a human's DNA to conform to the tribe, to conform to the pack, right? What have been can you remember back to a point in your life when conformity broke, or you managed to break conformity and actually take control of your own life in the incredibly beautiful way that you have done? Because although the travel thing and all that sort of stuff, there'll be lots of people that are envious of it and all that sort of jazz, but strip all that away. Your approach towards parenting is something that so many more people would become so much happier in being parents if they did that. So is there a moment in your life where conformity where you realize you went, shit, this conformity thing ain't for me?
Yeah, I mean, I ran away from home at 16 years old with $200 to my name and never went back and never got any support. I mean, my family didn't even reach out to me for about 6 months when I first left. It was like I was dead to them.
Why'd you leave?
Okay, this is the vulnerable part. So my mother, who passed away a few years ago, suffered, which I can now see as a lot of mental illness, which led to opiate addiction, drug addiction, alcohol, everything.
Yeah.
And I grew up in a very violent household in terms of her lashing out at me with the different mood swings and fluctuations. And as the oldest child of 3 children, I kind of stepped into the mother role from a very young age and pretty much raised my brother and sister alongside my father, who was a very codependent man. He's also not in my life anymore. But yeah, I had a very toxic dynamic in the household and I had to get out because I had to save myself. I was so unhappy there and I just didn't feel loved. And I just knew I just had to get away. It was like a survival mechanism. It was either I left the house or I left the earth. I mean, it sounds very heavy to say that, but that was kind of the choice. And I think having been thrown into, so I don't feel like I really had much of a childhood. Like I had to grow up very fast to basically run an entire household. At 13, I lied about my age to get my first job. I just wanted to be in the workforce. I wanted to be around an adult. I wanted to earn money. I wanted to have freedom. I didn't want to have to rely on anyone. So that started very, very young on in the piece. And then it became I will just continue to prove to everyone that I can make my life on my own terms and I can be successful and I can be happy. And that's fueled me to be able to achieve most of the things that I have achieved in life.
2 things. One, thank you for sharing that, by the way, as a first and foremost. We weren't planning on going there, gang. As is the case with a lot of these episodes. You mentioned in the green room as well that, and you've mentioned in this episode earlier on how you worked your backside off, you got into a position, you realized that in previous relationships that you had grown through those pieces and understood when was the time to move forward and move on. And now you're in this incredible relationship with a very aligned individual in Jack. And as a result, have this incredible kid on your hands, which looks like it looks absolutely bee's knees. A lot of people tend to, they tend to progress or they tend to evolve, but then they tend to sit in that state and sometimes sit in that state for too long and end up getting that feeling of resentment again and so on and so forth. What are the things for you? Because you're incredibly aware of yourself, right? And obviously from a young age and horrible experiences that you've turned on the heads and whatnot. What are the warning signs for you that something needs to evolve, something needs to change here?
It's a feeling of restlessness.
Right.
Feeling restless. That's normally when it's like, and Jack and I will sit down and have these conversations when either of us are like that. And that's when we need to plan something. We need to, put something into the future that we're both wanting to strive towards and mix things up or change things up or try and get to the next level or the next frontier.
Yep.
And make a plan and lock it in and put a date down. And then, and then that helps us grow and progress to the next level.
So it's restlessness plus a commitment.
Yeah, set a new commitment. Something that's going to, push you forward, or as Jack would say, elevate you.
Well, not steal his ammo just yet. Look, I could talk to you for a long, long time, and I'd love to have you back on because there's more of that conformity, breaking of conformity piece that I think you would bring tremendous value to the audience on.
Yeah, I think in a few more months' time too. Once you've
got
of travel and relocation and things
you've got
happening.
Restless. So
yeah, I think we're 14 months into being parents, and I just think that I guess it's still a novice period.
Yeah.
And we are still obviously figuring it out, but I think it'd be great to come back in another 6 to 12 months time and see what's happened. Where we're at then.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. There's one question though that I like to finish on.
Yep.
Before I let you go, and I wish I didn't have to let you go because you're an awesome chat. I started asking this when I asked Danielle Weber, who's an amazing artist, just off the cuff. In your pursuit of your own version of high performance, whatever that may be, what is the one thing missing from your game that you've identified as something that you need to bring into your game in some way, shape, or form?
Sometimes I can get too caught up in all of the things that I want to do and starting too many projects at once and not really wrapping or finishing things. So I'm the typical visionary at times that needs an integrator to follow me around. So I think integration for me is can be one of my weak points.
And you, in order to resolve that, instead of working it out for yourself, which is, again, with that question, a lot of people tend to think of, I need to get better at this, or I need, that's how they reflect on that question. You've gone really practical very, very quickly and gone, I've got someone who does that shit to help me with it, right?
Yeah.
That's an interesting way to end this episode because, team, throughout all of this conversation, we've talked altruistically, but Amanda's been bringing everything back down to a practical level. And I think whether that is just in your DNA or whether it's because of the way that you were brought up, where you had to get practical real fast.
Yeah.
Very similar to my old man, actually. My old man had a very similar sort of upbringing. And he had to get practical real quick. He joined the army when he was 15, right? Because he had to, because he was the oldest of three, abusive parents, blah, 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 almost carbon copy. And the practicality that he ran his life with, it actually ended up restricting him sometimes. But because you've identified that you've got a visionary piece in you, you've struck a balance that, I wish my old man was around to bloody have a chat with you about it, to be honest, because he could have done with some of that. But anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been an absolute delight. You are a model example. And team, for those of you that still got those silly little privileged comments whirring through your head and whatnot, this chick's not privileged. She's earned the right to have a life. And you can do that as well, but you've got to take a bit of ownership. And that's something that was forced on Amanda, it was forced on you.
Yep.
But you can control that yourself.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care, team. Until next time, stay safe, healthy, happy. Tune into the next episode where we have the other half of the equation joining us, Jack Delosa, who's going to give us his side of the story. Until next time, look after yourself, team. Take care.